Engineer Takes on Construction. Episode 1. Hi, I'm Bytnar. Each day I help my clients plan and design building projects through Bytnar Limited, a consulting chartered structural engineers practice. My biggest passion and the cornerstone on which I've built my business is finding clever solutions for construction projects. I am a chartered structural engineer and a budding software developer, so you can rest assured that I will strive to talk about the best practices and the use of new technologies in the industry. And if you're embarking on a construction project or are involved in planning, designing and building the world around us, you'll find this podcast useful. This episode is about the process of building project development, aka the plan of work. Hello you, thank you for tuning in to this podcast. It was a long time in brewing and it is this year's resolution that I intend to stick to. Hopefully it won't end up like one of those physically important ones that ended up costing your wallet rather than improving your lifestyle. I trust that in a year's time I'll be able to revisit this one and say, wow, we went a long way, but let's not get too much ahead of ourselves and deliver this one. You've listened to the intro, you more or less know who I am and what I stand for and what I want to talk about in this podcast. You see, on a daily basis, I enjoy having conversation with my colleagues, clients, fellow professionals. Some of these conversations are heavy and important, some are light and facetious, but with all these interactions I come out richer on the other side. And I hope this podcast will be like one of these conversations that after several minutes or several dozens of minutes, you end up enriched with something new or maybe different perspective on the aspects of your everyday life that you haven't thought about before. It may not be the first conclusion that pops to one's mind, you see, but the conversation is a tool of a personal and professional growth for me. I realized that I would love to share my take on the architectural, engineering and construction industry with you and use this podcast to improve myself as a speaker and in the process give you some food for thought. I hope this podcast will start many conversations, opinions, and I hope you'll not hesitate to share with me either commenting on this material or sharing it with your colleagues. Perhaps even popping me a little message on LinkedIn. I do not bite. And I very much like to hear from you, either in person, through social media, LinkedIn, whatever. I really don't care. Let's use these tools to start a conversation. I do not want this to be a lecture though. I want to talk about important things in simple terms. Many construction teams are assembled for the first time on any given project and usually the last time, with all of those different people, contractors, designers, architects, engineers, M&Es, whoever, and clients meeting for the first time, going through the project, and then that's that. End of story. Maybe we'll work on the other project together, maybe not. It really depends, but generally speaking, it's usually the case that it's one-off, and then we come back on any other projects with different sort of mix of people, skill, expertise. Most investors embark on the construction for the first time and the only time in the money management endeavor. From the intro, you know who I am, but not many people know that I am also married into plastic manufacturing family. And with the ongoing research and development project in AI for AEC, that's Architectural Engineering and Construction, I'm a proponent of visionary thinking with well-defined processes which can be changed or improved upon. Things like Toyota Way that revolutionized the manufacturing industry and its application to development and operations of software or manufacturing processes. Concept of Hoshinkanri and Kaizen using Kanban to visualize work. This sort of ideas, the sort of approach to everyday running of business, everyday running of project delivery or project definition, somehow evades the AEC industry. How about construction projects? Is there anything alike to what I just mentioned? Well, kind of, you see. All of that process is thinking how to approach the whole definition of the project is a little bit of a hit and miss, albeit Royal Institute of Chartered Architects did see that as an issue in the last century and devised RIBA plan of work, which throughout the years has developed to what is now called RIBA Plan of Work 2020, which this podcast, this episode will concentrate upon. Funny with RIBA plans of work, when I started my career some 10 years ago as an engineer that just finished HNC program and starting my bachelor's degree, but working in the same time, I wanted to know it all. It wasn't enough to know, Hooke's law or Euler's equations, all that engineering talk, stiffnesses and bending moments and shear. I wanted to know more. In my perspective, when I was joining the industry, I thought, come on, it's simple. It's bloody buildings, right? It's roads. It's stuff that I've been doing for thousands of years now. It should be simple. Someone should have a good grasp of it and doing a good job day in and day out. I soon realized that it isn't the case, and most of the businesses, most of the projects, most of the designs and deliveries of these projects are a little bit hit and miss. And when I approached my then former director and a business owner talking about the stages of work on one of the projects, I got the disdain look at me saying, "What? Stage 3? Stop talking like an architect. Just get on with the job, design it and push it out of the office." So that I did. Later on, listening to symposiums, going on to the trade shows and such, listening to the professionals at the peak of their careers doing massive projects, it seems like it's similar case to what the smaller ones do, although at a much, much larger scale. So without further ado, let's talk about the plan of work, shall we? So, project definition and delivery process. That's a good one, right? If you work on a small project, everyone just get on with it. Maybe on a more complex one, there's a little bit more of the organization skills there, but seems like everyone just push on the papers, push on the specifications down the line until, we got a hole in the ground and then there is a building standing upon that hole. And hopefully, at the end of the process, the person who pays for it is happy with it or actually makes money off of it. The troubles with the approach to the whole thing is that it's greatly disjointed, you see. For the plan of works, I've pondered a lot how to begin talking on this subject. I think it sort of seems a little bit removed if you don't get the context of how important it is in the context of planning, designing and executing a construction project. So I realized that it will be best to talk about it in 6 points. The point number 1 will be about how the projects are defined and delivered in different places in the world. There is a great table at the beginning of the introductory guide to RIBA plan of work, which you can find on the RIBA website. And I'll use that to reflect on differences between the world and here. Then I'll move to the point number 2 to talk about how things look like in general in Britain on projects up to £1 million. This sort of projects are my bread and butter, and I'm very often included within the design an execution team at all sorts of different stages that have a breadth of knowledge and experience delivering such projects. And I can tell you that it is a wild, wild west very often out there. Then I'll talk about similar thing, but on the slightly larger projects that go over £1 million, perhaps going to £5-10 million. I've worked and advised on all different aspects of delivery of such projects from different perspectives, and they're not as often occurrence in our office as of yet, but nevertheless I see a big difference between those that are under £1 million to those that are up to £10 million. Then I'll move on to say what the plan of work is, what are the stages of it. There are 8 of them. 2, pre-design, definition of the project. Then there are several that treat about designing the actual projects, and then execution, handover and use. I'll talk a little bit about history of the plan of works, briefly mention the changes, and then gets to the current plan of work 2020, which is the one that our industry is currently working. And finally, with point 6, I say a couple of words about how the process should look like, starting from stage 0 all the way to stage 0. And I know that will intrigue you, but you'll find out why soon. So, how things look like in the world. Historically, delivery of building projects were done by rules of thumb, empirical approaches, usually defined and guided the builders or architects, if you like, of the past. I wouldn't hang myself too much on the word architect, as architect describes anyone who deals with definition and build of the project, so it's not per se nowadays definition of architects, of a person who's registered with the boards of architects. It's not the point. Architecture is a broad science, and the science of creating spaces, useful spaces for people. When I talk about architecture historically, that's what I pretty much mean. And architecture was pretty much that throughout the ages, using empirical rules that were passed from master to master, either by written records or just by word of mouth. Some forgotten, then rediscovered, and forgotten again, then rediscovered again. A little bit of a circumstance we got now, although we claim that we're so much better now with all of the IT solutions, all of the computerized ways of doing things, AI and whatnot. But we tend to do the same thing. We tend to forget good ways of working, then we rediscover them, we reapply them. And funny enough, we've been building for quite some time now, several thousands of years, maybe longer if you ask your archaeological friends, but we didn't go that much ahead of our ancestors. We still build buildings that are simple, that are protecting us from the environment. They may be a little bit leaner when it comes to the use of materials, but they're not that lean as one would like them to be. They're not optimized per se. For most of the time, we've been building buildings on a whim, if you like, and then came the time of industrialization and putting processes in and thinking about delivery of either manufacturing bits and bobs or buildings per se in a well and structured way. Obviously, Britain is in the forefront of such thinking, being one that started the industry revolution. But it wasn't until 1963 that we had a first plan of work in place. And it's still the case in many countries around the world that projects are being conceived in a hurried or whimsical fashion, designed quickly and roughly, or slowly and painstakingly. But still, in between this country, between these regions of the world, things are being delivered a little bit differently to one another. However, one can easily see that there are some sections of the project delivery that are the same for everyone. We can find that most of the construction project development processes can be divided into what I call four sections. The first section is pre-design stage, where business case or a personal need arises and is found to be best fulfilled by a building construction project. When that's defined and we know what sort of project more or less we'd like to go forward with, we go into the design part section of the process, which obviously can be more or less detailed. Then after design part of it, we get to the construction part of it, which forms the actual construction and the interface between the construction and the client and the person who conceived the idea and put the money for the execution of it, which is called handover. And into the part that's called in use and sometimes end of life. They are called the use part of it. Obviously nowadays we like to extend the life of the building project, as it's much better utilization of material. It's much better for the planet and everyone else around it to reuse the building rather than to demolish and build anew. And with the clever engineering and architecture, it can be achieved very easily, and the existing buildings use can be changed, and buildings are very malleable and they can be changed in use to anything humanly conceivable. Well, maybe not from the hotel to nuclear power station, but you get the gist. And in this four section, pre-design, design, construction and use, different countries in the world treat about them differently. So in Britain, you obviously have a well-defined pre-design stages. In Europe, they're sort of treated as a one whole bunch. United States do not recognize it at all. Neither does Russia or Spain. There are some type of understanding of this part of the process in other countries. When we get to the design stages of buildings, three main sections in Britain, there are four in Europe, two in Spain, but generally they tend to follow similar approach. And even if there are less stages, the amount of information still need to be delivered in similar fashion to similar detail at the end of that section of the process. Then we get to the construction, which sometimes solely concentrate on the act of delivery of the actual building, road or bridge or whatnot, without considering the handover stage of things. But in Britain there is handover stage of things, as is in global perspective. However, Russia, New Zealand or Australia don't really recognize this stage as important. And then we have in-use part of it, which most of the countries do not really bother with, but which is very important. And this part, actually, I'd say this part is the most important part of all of the other parts, as this part informs about the building, about the construction, about its use, how good it is, how environmentally and sustainable it is throughout its life cycle. which can be then fed in and to improve the whole process. Without this one, we basically we push our project from the production line and we forget about it. We don't care about the client, we don't care about the impact it has. We solely concentrate on pushing the projects out, pushing the buildings out, mostly concentrate on PR marketing and how much money we can all make out of it. When concentrated in use and end of life cycle of the building, we can actually define better buildings for future. Most of the countries do not recognize end of life stage of the building, neither does RIBA. However, I would argue that end of use should be considered within in use. After all, what happens at the end of the building process is sometimes as important as what happens when it's being used and when it's being delivered. Just look at the nuclear power stations. How long it takes to plan, construct, operate, and then decommission. How long are these periods and how costly are they? So I hope you get the gist, a bit of appreciation at the sections of process that are considered in Britain and other parts of the world. They are a little bit different. At the end of the day, in all other places in the world, they still build buildings, sometimes to the better definition and better standard than over here. However, looking at the amount of British-based design offices and their influence around the world, I think we're doing something pretty good over here. The plan of work generally goes from the point 0, strategic definition, through to preparation and a brief, stage 2 concept, 3 develop design, 4 technical design, 5 construction, 6 handover and closeout, and 7 in use. It's 8 stages that define the process in Britain and how we think about it. Having all of that defined is really helpful. Although, as I mentioned beforehand, when I started in a small practice and I mentioned the stage 3 reports would be nicely received if we prepared such in our office, I was laughed at. So you can imagine how it all works. To be honest, with onset of technology, all of the possibilities we got now, we don't have to go into the minute details of reporting on every single calculations we do or specification, as is quite standardized nowadays. You'd think that the building projects will be well thought through from the word go all the way to the use, but it's not the case. On most of the projects under the £1 million, things are quite messy from the beginning to the end. It usually begins with someone going on the whim, oh, I like a house that will have all of the bells and whistles, beautiful big glazings, plenty of light, but in the same time energy efficient and smart, with Internet of Things, everything to be interconnected and such. Push for the maximum without breaking the bank, without really knowing how the process looks like, without knowing all of those 8 stages that usually should be thought about for the good definition and for the good outcomes of the project. Usually, in most of the cases of projects under £1 million, you cannot really see these 8 stages. They are mixed up. Sometimes people go few stages forward, then you find out that you need to redo something else. I think the easiest example to illustrate that would be simple projects of house extensions, which sometimes in a bigger remodeling projects would be over £1 million, but generally go down to £200,000 or thereabout. And there is this weird we're thinking that the builder who's been building same thing for the last 10 years would be the best place to give the advice on the best solution and a way forward. People somehow are reclusive or reluctant rather to invest in a good process and employment of architects, engineers, people who could define the projects they need in better terms. Very often it's been considered that all of these professionals do are drawings, and anyone can draw a building, and people sometimes do try to do it on their own, which is very often less successful than not. Unfortunately, most of this sort of projects do save on good definition on the stages 0, 2 to 4, and then when it comes to construction at the stage 5, projects suffer. Projects suffer on myriad of problems, which are very often cleverly concealed, and maybe not even cleverly concealed. You see, people that are delivering these projects, they're resourceful bunch, and at the end of the day, they just want to get the project done. The easiest way to do so is to push forward. So how do you push forward when you've got ill-defined projects at the construction stage? Well, you try to find people that do have an answer, and you rarely go back to the people that define the projects, so very often they are not qualified to design the projects to start with. They're usually architectural designers, people that do indeed concentrate on the appearance of the building rather than about all of the building regulations and engineering issues that need to be included as you go and define the project. And they try to find answers elsewhere. Most of the time, directions for the delivery of such projects can be found for free online, and they are called approved documents. And because they are freely available, people think that just copying the ideas from them is enough. The sad fact and sad truth of it is that there is plethora of misunderstanding or misconception about all of the information that's written within those documents. They're not that easy to read. Even well-versed professionals sometimes struggle to do so. But nevertheless, so far before the advent of Building Safety Act, people were plowing through all those bad designs, all those misinformations, all those bad informations, all that good information that needs to be applied well to be useful and to be safe. So I guess what I'm trying to say, when the project got to the stage of the builder getting on site, the builder, they just went on with it, trying to find some sort of consensus with building control. They usually went with building notice, knowing more or less what to do. They were expecting building control to come round and correct them whatever needed. Building control sometimes did it. Some private inspectors were never on site, just receiving some pictures and giving their judgments upon these. So you see, it's quite messy, and if you don't know what you're doing, you may not even see that's the problem. You may be just, sometimes when the issues appear, you'll be brushed away with the statements, oh, it wasn't on plan, so I made a decision, but we had to plow through, otherwise boys would do nothing, so now we need to redo it, now you need to pay more, or we need to do this because it wasn't involved in the plans to start with. Well, of course it wasn't, because it was never approached in the right way. Many good places that deliver on this type of clients, they usually try to be safe on the safer side of specification of things, as if you don't go on to be in control of what's built on the building site, you never know what actually will. From the personal experience, and in my professional career, I think I delivered around 450 design projects of varying sizes, and on very few, when I went on site, they were actually built according to specifications. At the 1 million and below projects, the plans, all of the documentation that you do, it actually never leaves the van. So I argue, if there's even sense of preparing any of them whatsoever, when your contractor most likely won't use them, as they will go on their experience and the way they know how to build buildings. And that's fine in many cases, and that's how they used to be delivered back in the days. And well, whether I need to persuade you whether it's a wasteful way of doing things or not, well, you may decide for yourself. On your next project, if you think to skip on all of those professionals that actually want to help you to define, to mold your projects to the best of what it can be, and then assure that it's actually delivered this way and no corners are cut. When it comes to a slightly bigger projects of over £1 million or several £1 million, there's generally enough in clients understanding that it will be worthwhile to actually define many things before the more involved design stages begin. There's more time and money and scope for site investigations on existing buildings, where they are changed for use or extended or changed in layout. There's usually good case for geotechnical evaluation, which helps to find the best foundation solution for the project. On this project, there's generally enough interest to save a lot of money by defining the projects well. The actual clients already find out that if they are spending that much money, it's well worth spending 5, 10, 15% of it to well evaluate all of the constraints, issues that may arise during the construction over the way, things that are not yet found, like soil conditions. So with the good consultants on board, you will be taken on the road through all of those different investigation works that will inform the projects better, and we are allowed to save money, save carbon, and deliver projects that will be successful. That's one. Close to the budget, that's two. And three, which I think is very, very important, as close to being optimized as possible, and therefore economically, sustainably better. Alright, so what on earth is that plan of work? Is it a devious way of Royal Institute of British Architects to make our life miserable and make us pay through the roof for the consultations and the work of people, to spend all of our money on not needed processes and involvement of people that shouldn't be charging as much for the services? Or is it a way of trying to organize and systematize and making building environment and defining the building projects and delivering the building projects better? Well, I hopefully be able to answer this question at the end of this podcast. But the plan of work, as I've mentioned earlier, is being developed and brewing since 1963 with its first edition. It had several changes during the years, like 91 and 2007, where the stages of works have been expanded with the 8th one, called post-occupancy evaluation, which is now called use stage. It's been updated during 2013 edition. At the 2013 edition, with all subject BIM related, and now with its 5th iteration, the plan of work 2020 is the one we're working with, and the one that we're treating as a foundation for the good project delivery, or at least the way to look at the project in more systematized, in more organized way. The RIBA plan of work is typically divided into stages. When I talked about delivery of the processes through generally globally, I said that when you look at the life cycle of a construction project, you can see 4 different sections of it, which are pre-design, design, construction, and use. And within that sections, the RIBA plan of works divides that further. So at the pre-design stage of it, you have stage 0, which is a strategic definition. What that means is the time when a need appears, whether you are a homeowner and you need that extra bedroom because the family is growing, or you have a production facility and you need that additional space for new machinery or storage, or the current road system cannot handle the traffic and you need to define a new crossing or bypass through the sections of the city, river, or otherwise. Or basically, it's a part of your business model, and you deliver flats, housing for people to live in, or people to casually pop into, like hotels or hospitals. Once you go through this stage 1, called preparation and brief, it means you assemble all of the information you require to define your project, all of the expectations that you need. You gather your team that will help you define all of these, as you may be more or less ready to do so by yourself. You define all of the key aspects of it and such, and after having all of this information handy, you can move on to the design section of the plan of work, which starts with stage 2 and ends with stage 4. Stage 2 is the stage where you explore your ideas, concepts for these designs, possible solutions, what sort of buildings you want to build, how many stories, or what sort of layouts can there be. You're trying to mold your idea into the actual expression on paper so everyone can appreciate it. It's not only about writing about things now, it's about defining them. Following the concept stage, design, you move into a spatial coordination where all of the different parts of the design team come together, trying to put the building sometimes apart when it is an old one and then reassemble it in the right way, or simply to put all of the aspects of the building so it does not collide with one another, so all of the aspects of the building can live happily together, so the building is safe and usable. At this stage, it really isn't now all about making the building the most economical possible. However, very often at that stage, the tender documents are sent over, and when they're back, the client realizes they don't have enough money to cover the project, so it comes back on the drawing board to be reevaluated and redone. Once you're happy to move forward and you're sort of sure that there's enough money, there's enough design, and that everyone is happy with that design, including the planning office, you can move forward to technical design and closing all of the other aspects of the building project, all of the more minute details that are safety critical, and will need to form part of the building regulation submission. Obviously, there are more legal requirements and such, but I'll talk about this one on my following podcast when I'll be taking each and every single one of these stages apart, so you can appreciate it in more detail and in all different type of projects and scenarios. Once that's done, you can move on to manufacturing construction, which is stage 5. As it says on the tin, at that stage, the heavy machinery, all of the people, and all of the dust is being raised as the building is being built or the construction project is being delivered. At that stage, there shouldn't be much of the design work to be done, but yet again, going back to my previous points, usually on stage, on the buildings underneath £1 million, there'll still be plenty of design to be done, which haven't been covered by anyone beforehand, and there'll be a lot of problems with it. But there shouldn't be. There should be specialized items, maybe staircases, railings, and auxiliary architectural elements that are being designed at this stage and coordinated with the rest of the design team. But following this technical design, it all should be all true and well put in place before the construction. On some projects it still may not be, as I say, but yeah, I'll talk about that a little bit more when I put that into a separate podcast. Then following the construction, we get to the stage 6, which is handover and closeout, which generally involves completing the construction works and handing over the building to the person who's paying for it, to the client, ensuring all of the necessary documents are in place and handed over to the client. In simple buildings, there's not many of them that need to be handed over, but on more complex one, there is a plethora of documents, sometimes including BIM, sometimes including clones of the buildings in building information model that contain most of this or all of this information for future management of the building and to making sure that the building is ready for occupation. There's time for snagging, to check and to fix any issues that could have arisen or may not have been done the way they should be done. But this generally should be small and easy to handle. And then we go to the stage 7, in use, which I claim to be the most important part of it. As you know, throughout the centuries of human existence, we've been building billions of buildings and construction projects, but not much of the feedback ever came back from it. And nowadays, I think we should realize the wealth of knowledge and data storage and use that to inform our choices for future. And that generally ends. Stage 7 in use generally ends the consideration, monitoring of the building and its performance, and seeing what sort of issues arise from use of that building, including change of use during use. It's very often that building made as an office can become a hotel, can become hospital, can become all sorts of other things during its lifetime, can become flats and so on. And how was that building and its layout, how useful was it, the way it's been originally built and designed for all of those changes, and how did that look like? The feedback is very, very, very important, including the feedback from occupants and all of the sensors that could be placed in the building as well to inform us in future. I've said that the stages go from stage 0 to 0, and now I'll explain to you why. Following stage 7 in use, if we don't go back with all of that feedback to stage 0 to define the better standards, we won't use this feedback and won't develop better standards. Check that against what we do in the office, how we approach the building design and construction. All of that information, although thought about, will be lost. And unfortunately, on very many occasions, it is still being the case. Only the best offices that charge adequately can do that. As you see, not many clients see much of the use from paying for the stage 7, as is very often is the first project in life and most likely the last one. So they don't really care how evaluation of that building will feed into the design and delivery of the next one. However, it will. And being short-sighted in this stage, not involving that in your business, in your design and building operation, it's not only costing you money in the long run and clients, it's also costing the actual client or the next client and the environment, as you're not drawing the right conclusions from the whole process, and you again allowing the whole process to lay wasted. And I think that's very important, and that's why we haven't really, well, not only that, because the whole process is very fragmented and there's plethora of different specialisms and different stakeholders that actually take part in definition, design and construction, handover and management of the building. There's many people and many organizations involved usually in this sort of circumstances, but it's very important to contractually have access to all of that information, all of that data, and to feed in that back to the operation of your own office, whatever you do. Otherwise, however smart we are, however clever our AI solutions will be, they will not be that clever at all if that data won't be fed back into the model, whether that is your business operational model or your AI model. Now, how should the process look like? Well, it is a tough one. It is a tough one because there's so many different project scopes, there's so many different needs and businesses. However, I am a firm believer that the project should begin with the stage 0, using all of the input gathered throughout the existence of one business or one practice, and feed all of that into the advice of a client at the stage 0. Stage 0 and stage 1, both of these stages, they're non-design stages. These stages are stages to define the project, define the need, asking the question whether building project or construction project is the solution for the need and for the problem. Sometimes it may not be. Or sometimes the project may be the case that may be the need of the business or the individual, but the place and the scope of it and the feasibility for the delivery of it won't allow it to happen and may need to be reevaluated. And this can be defined at stage 0. It's a very important stage. In my opinion, the most experienced and clever offices should take part in this stage, and the client shouldn't shy away from reaching out to appropriate individuals or firms to become part of the decision-making process. Especially when your project is one of a kind, or your project is your first one and likely the last one, or the second or third. If you're not doing that day in, day out, you'll soon find out that no matter how much of the internet you browse through, Google won't have all of the answers, and soon the Excel spreadsheet will stop making sense when you get to the next stages of it. And at this part of it, it's if you got the right people at the right place, you can rest assured that the next steps will be the steps that you want to take. And if you do realize that the building project is the answer, you can move to stage 1, where you can evaluate it a little bit further, where your advisors can tell you all the parts and things that need to be considered, including taking the sites you got, how you gonna deliver the project. If you want to think about how you're gonna deliver the project, including site delivery, site organization, logistics, I'm not saying about like nitty-gritty of it, but in general, it can influence, it can make or break your project, and can, or rather, make or break your bank if you decide wrongly how to approach it at this stage. At this stage, you should be informed about all of the things that you should do. It is, I think, a good parallel here would be to compare this stage to the purchase decision process when you need to buy something, right? You realize there is a need for it, then you need to educate yourself so to what sort of solutions are out there, and that's where your advisors come with their experience and special knowledge. Then once you choose one of the ways forward, you can dive a little bit deeper as you find information how to deal with all of the other aspects of it. You get all of the people involved that could help you with this. This could be all sorts of things, as I mentioned, how to deliver the project, what sort of budget you can do, what will be the approach to sustainability of that project, what sort of materials could be used here, what sort of materials are available near you. If you are quite remote and there are no concrete works there, how are you going to deliver it? Is it make sense to actually bring cement over and mix it on site, or maybe get pre-done elements and modularize the whole build, or maybe get timber solutions in, or steel. So you see, there's all sort of different aspects that can be looked into and should be looked into at this stage. And once that's done, you can move into the concept design stage of things. And you'll find out, find out in the preparation of the brief stage, it may transpire that the project actually is a little bit over, maybe a little bit over the budget after all. So you may need to go back to the strategic definition and maybe reevaluate your needs and make some concessions there. Then go back to the preparation and brief. And once all that's set in stone, move into the employment of the design team, your architects, engineers, MEP engineers and such. Now, from that it gets to the design stage of it, which design section of the plan of work, which consists of 3 stages: concept design, spatial coordination, and technical design. Consecutively, stages 2, 3, and 4. Here at the concept design, you start drawing, start molding all of the expectations, taking in consideration all of the feasibility studies and project briefs, into consideration to get the idea of how the project should look like. And if you define the brief well, this shouldn't be much of the problem, because it's pretty much putting this brief, putting those expectations and putting these realistic expectations into physical, into the conceptual designs, models, preliminary specifications of things. Design stages here now are again iterative, because you'll get to the concept stage of things, concept design stage of things. You set your layouts, general look of things, or general look of building or construction projects, or the way you want to do it, whether it be a bridge or or a tunnel. And then you get your spatial coordination, where you need to work out with other designers how to put all of those things together so you actually can use the space the way you wanted to use it at the first place. And at this point, it may transpire that there are some problems there, and then you may not be able to use the space the way you wanted to use it, and that indeed may cause problems. And this spatial coordination part of things may return an error message, if you like, which will say, okay, we need to get back to the concept design now, because there are some things wrong with it now. Like, well, there is a column in the middle of the room and we wanted to have a bed over there, But taking the layout, if we take that column away from there, we could build another few rooms. And so if you want to think about changing the layout, you pay through the roof to push it without this column. And whether that makes sense or not, if you don't have time now to get back to the concept design stage, and then from that concept design stage maybe to vary the brief, even go stage behind design, or change the concept design to address those issues, then you begin the downward spiral of wasteful design behavior and specification. So now it would be the time to go back to the concept design, change it and iterate it back into the spatial coordination, and if that works well, move it forward to the stage 4 to ironing out all of the details. You see, you may have a column shown on that drawing in the middle of the room, as I said, but now you've changed the layout and that column is hidden within the room. But when it comes to the technical design, it transpired that the connection of this column to the beam will stick out from the ceiling. So you need to either think about how to change it so the connection is different and is not seen in the ceiling, or make the ceiling lower, or embellish it in some different way. So that's technical design. Once all of that's done, you can move into the manufacturing. There shouldn't be much of design happening at that stage. But as I mentioned before, is rarely the case, as usually those definitions are quite messy. But in the ideal circumstance, you should have all of the information ready to go. And once you go, there only may be some issues during the works, some mistakes done by people on site, or miscommunication between specifications drawing and the people executing the works that will need to be rectified, or maybe designed ever so slightly changed so the mistake isn't that bad of a circumstance after all. So that be it. And obviously, well, there will be design, but design on the temporary work part of things, how to deliver the building safely, So you need to think, as you construct the building, you need to think how to do it safely, and what sort of stages, you need to plan it. You need to plan it. When you get to the construction stage of things, which is stage 5, it is pretty much too late to vary design at this stage. If you need to vary design at this stage, you usually have 2, 3, 5, 10, 20 people already on site. And if you stop at that point and get things back to the designers, and they will have to coordinate everything, and they get back to you, and you have 2, 3, 4, 5 week or 2 weeks standing around, imagine what sort of costs are these for the construction crew, for the main contractor. It's not really a case of bad design. It's not really a case of being too quick and going on into the construction without having all of the information handy. It's usually the worst practice ever. However, sometimes projects are long-winded, are overly complicated, but you need to start as quickly as possible so that design stages and construction stages may interact with each other, but they should be done in a stage basis. So one stage or one part of the building should be closed and ready to go for the construction with all of the documentation before the next one's being issued. So we can address any issues if they arise, but that would be it. Following the manufacturing and construction part, gets to the moment that building is finished or approaching being finished, and you start collecting all of the documents, all of the information about the building, making all of the surveys done by the clients to prove that you've done a good job, hopefully. But very often trying to prove that there's so many snaggings that they need to retain part of the money until you make it right. The manufacturing and construction stages and handover stages, they usually overlap. a little bit at the end of the project, and from there you get into the use and the evaluations of the building as they stand, which is a vital part of the whole building process, but often neglected, often skipped, often not considered in quoting for the professional services, therefore making the whole process all that poorer in definition. So how should the process look like? We're going from strategic definition, finding out what we need to build, what we want to build, going to stage number one, preparing a brief, preparing all of the information that are required, including budget, plans, construction stages, envisaged construction stages, etc. We get to the concept stage. From the concept stage, once we know what we want to build, we go into spatial coordination. In spatial coordination, if everything's fine, we go to technical design. If not, we return back to concept design, and sometimes from there back to the brief, if need be, and then regurgitate that and go again back into the concept and reiterate the spatial coordination. From there, we go to technical design, which sometimes requires going back to spatial coordination, concept, and brief. But that should be less of an issue, as people at the earlier stages should be more or less aware of what will happen at the technical stage, design, and try to design out any issues that could possibly arise at that point. From there, all of the documentation, specifications, and contracts are done with the main contractor. In stage 5, the contractor manufacture and build the project for us and hands it over. Once the project is handed over to you, to the client, you gotta, with the help of the professional, information about the use of that building throughout its lifetime. So you see, it's pretty simple. As you could expect at the very beginning, it is easy. Well, you just want to build a building, you design it, you build it, you use it, that's done. But in truth, taking in consideration how many people, how many different practices and organizations are involved in defining the need, defining the brief, defining the design, and constructing the building, and how then people are using it or reusing it or changing the use of it, it becomes all that much more complicated. And it's very important that at the end of it all, we can draw out lessons and apply them back into the process again. So with little and incremental improvements, we can make the process better. As you see, it's hard to define it straight away, but thinking about the construction, building development, or construction initiatives holistically and in the process-like manner, in a process like RIBA, say, we can make the industry and the approach a little bit better year after year. And who knows, maybe after another several thousand years, we'll finally get there and be on the par with manufacturers. But perhaps this will come with an advent of all-encompassing consulting offices rather than disjointed crews, or maybe software that will join us all together. Only time will tell. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope it wasn't too long for you to listen through all of that. Maybe it was a little bit too much. But with the next podcast, I will come back to it. I will quickly recap it and then concentrate on every single stage of the plan of work, RIBA plan of work 2020. So it will slowly start to make sense as we go. Today we talked about how things look like in general in the world and Britain, how the process looks like on projects smaller, costing less than £1 million, how things generally look like on projects more expensive than £1 million, up to £5–10 million. What is the plan of work and its stages? A brief history of its development, and then how should the process look like? I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you for sticking around till the very end. I hope you've enjoyed the content. I intend to carry on in this way, having simple conversation about the difficult topics of construction. I appreciate not many people may be familiar with the idea of plan of work and how to apply it to the project. Therefore, I will continue in the following podcast concentrating on each particular stage of work as defined in the RIBA Plan of Work 2020, giving you some personal perspective, which I hope you'll find useful. If you have suggestions or topics that you would like to hear me treating about, I want to know it. Let's have the conversation that you care about. If you are industry professional and would like to share your take on the industry or share your expertise with the things you're involved in, I'll gladly have a coffee with you and record our conversation for the listeners to benefit from. For now, that's it. Toodaloo.